Hi, and welcome back to Speakeasy TV. I'm Alfie, and this is Imran. Last
How
week,
you doing?
all right. Last week we were talking about struggling during the COVID financial crisis in Britain, and we're continuing this in part two. Today we'll be talking about your CV and finding jobs. Last week we were talking about getting your house in order, about dealing with your creditors, your mortgage, and your utilities. Now that that's out of the way, you can start feeling a little bit clearer in your mind and have a little less anxiety, we hope, while you focus on dealing with the next hazard and the next hurdle, as it were.
You know, for me, I think personally, this would be the fun part for me because it's kind of thing that I tend to excel in terms of what do I do now to get myself back on my feet. And I think in this situation, obviously, there's a lot of other people who are experiencing or going through exactly what you're going through. You know, in terms of not having a job, laid off, furlough, etc., financial problems, and so on. So once you've kind of dealt with the most important things to make sure that you keep a roof over your head, make sure you keep the lights on, make sure your family are fed and taken care of. Um, then what you can do now is kind of start thinking about how to get yourself back on your feet. And one of the interesting things, that we've discussed earlier is kind of brainstorming ideas in terms of what you could do to essentially get yourself back into employment. Maybe something different from what you've been doing before. Let's say you've been doing manual work and you think, okay, I now want to work in an office using a computer. Maybe change from doing manual work and get into sales, for example, IT sales or whatever kind of sales that you want to do. So that's kind of like something to consider. Or you might have other interests. You might think, okay, now I want to get into digital media. I want to learn how to make videos and how to help others promote their businesses. There's a ton of things you can do. So it's a case of sitting down with a bit of paper, pen and paper, and then writing down what you're interested in, what skills you've got, and what skills you now need to learn in terms of improving your chances of getting the kind of job that you want to move into from what you previously had.
So you're saying that developing a journal.
A journal's a great idea. I mean, not only from, I guess, a personal perspective, because you can, yeah, I mean, I've done journals. Okay, so what I would tend to do is write things down that happened on that day. So, for example, if I had a good day, you had mental health issues, you had arguments, you had financial issues, whatever it is, you've written the problem down, and then you've written down also how you handled that situation. So over time, you can create a body of work, and then you can look back and think, okay, you know what? I went through all of this, I managed to deal with it, and I've come out on top. Also, in terms of with the journal, you can keep a record of the things that you've done with regards to speaking to your mortgage provider, for example, your utility company. You can put down the names, the telephone numbers, the contacts, the emails that you need. So if you ever need that information again, it's easy for you to find. And it's a good record of I guess, of potentially showing the progress that you've made from where you were to where you are to where you want to get to.
Okay. Well, I mean, the most important thing at this point is that um, for those of us who've lived through previous recessions, there's always been a two-dimensional thought pattern about jobs. It's I'm unemployed. I need to find a job. I'll just go and take the next job I can find, preferably in the area that I've already been working in. Unfortunately, this time it's a little different. Um, there are whole industries that are collapsing. We can't even be sure that some industries will still be there in 5 years, let alone the ones that are already collapsing, because there's a lot of changes coming, and that there's repercussions to the COVID situation, and potentially changes within Brexit about the way things are done and how companies operate, and there may be the companies may change their emphasis and moving in different directions. We can't know what these things are going to be. We just need to be prepared and to keep up with them. So the journal is a good idea, um, and part of using that journal is remembering that there is now a short to medium term. We just need a job to keep the bills paid, and then there is the long term. So in your journal, you could put down the jobs that you can do, write down your skills, and expand it out to jobs that you are related that you could also apply for, and then be looking at a job that you could be doing. Um, something new, something that you've thought about in the past, something that you may have originally meant to go into, but life circumstances changed and you never actually got to do that. But now, suddenly, it seems potentially more plausible again. Now, this may require a lot of training, this may require not much training, but we must be open to the idea that um, just applying for a new job with the qualifications and skills that we already have, despite the length and the breadth of that skill and training, may not be enough now. Companies may be wanting new skills, and there are certainly some industries that require you to retake your GCSEs and potentially another A level. It really depends on what it is, but obviously when you're researching those areas for your long-term career, potentially your final career, um, you will need to be looking at any training uh, that may be needed, and then researching whether that training is available at an affordable price or whether you can do it for free. As a person that's unemployed, if you're on JSA or Universal Credit, there are a number of courses that are available to you for free, like your local college. Certainly, GCSEs and things like that are available for free when you have that letter or a screenshot of your Universal Credit account. There are other ones that are available that were put down by the government on the .gov website, which include digital media, IT skills, and a few other bits and pieces. But then there are also online courses um, all over. I mean, there are companies like Coursera, there is Open University, um, and there's Allison. Now, some of these do free courses, some of these do entirely, um, all of their courses are free, and some of them you only get introductions. But it's a question of having a look through these places and seeing things that interest you. Because even if it doesn't go into the job that you actually get, it does look like you've been working hard to improve yourself and your prospects. And how
Uh,
do you feel about that, Emma?
okay, so let's say, for example, we find ourselves in a situation, lost our job. We're in the middle of a recession, a pandemic. Um, so what on earth would I do personally? Personally, I would sit down. I would take care of the very first thing that we mentioned. Get your house in order, deal with your creditors, okay? Um, and then I would kind of start thinking about making a short plan. What do I need to do to get my life back on track? First thing is think of any kind of job that I could potentially do. I don't have any disabilities, thankfully. So, if a warehouse job comes up, I can take it. If it's a manual job, if it's an office-based job, I can use computers and office packages quite well. My communications are reasonably good. So all these things I could do, even if it's a receptionist job or a security job or helping out or an assistance job somewhere. So I could potentially do that. Look at admin jobs, for example. Obviously it's not ideal, but it's a start for me. Second thing, I think once I've done that, got my house in order, started thinking about what kind of jobs that I could do, I would kind of think from the perspective, how can I be useful for any organization that I'm going to contact? So what is it that they need from me? And then focus in on that. If it's communication skills, if it's dealing with customers, if it's administration, just make sure that I highlight the experience that I've got. I'm thorough, I can communicate well, I'm organized, motivated, etc. That's the way that I would approach in terms of looking for a job. But I think before that, I'd look after myself first, mentally and physically, just get some kind of regime in place. Let's say, for example, I want to go out for half an hour to an hour every day, just for a walk, get some exercise and some fresh air. So I'm looking after myself mentally and physically. I would also take a little bit of time to plan out, maybe like I said in the first video, get up an hour early or half an hour early, make sure I'm ready, I've got everything set up the night before, and I can start doing my research into potential companies and the types of jobs that I'm interested in applying for. So once I've got all that figured out, we've discussed the fact that we need to make a CV, update it. Trick with CVs is to tailor them for each particular job. If there are no jobs, then you can tailor your CV for the company that you're applying for. Let's take, for example, IT sales. So if I knew this particular company sold computers, I would research what sectors they sell to, whether that's NHS, public sector, local councils and authorities, if it's corporates. And then I would tailor my CV to say, okay, I've done this in the past, I've sold to corporates. However, sales is sales, my communication skills are good, I'm determined, I'm organized, and I can, cross sell to other sectors such as public sector, for example. So that's the way that I would tailor my CV. Second thing I would do is research the company, obviously, find out the person who I would work for in that organization. I'd use a couple of tricks to get that information, maybe ring up the company and ask them directly, which more than likely won't work. Maybe make a phone call into their sales team and say, look, I'm interested in doing business with you. Who's your sales manager there? So I can get some background research. Salespeople are generally quite keen to help, so they'll pass that information on to you. And then you can email your CV directly to that person. You've now taken the step from going from the bottom of the pile, potentially, because you're in competition with lots of other people that are out there unemployed and looking for jobs. And you've gone from the bottom and you've gotten yourself to the top 20%. By doing your research, finding out who you need to send your CV directly to, you've kind of pushed yourself up to the 1 to 5% level. So you've increased your chances of getting your job by 80 or 90%. So if you were just to generally send out a CV to the HR department, it's got to go through various layers. And they might not even like your CV and throw it in the bin. But if you've made an effort to get it to the person that potentially you could be working for, you've proven to them that you're capable of doing your research and getting yourself an introduction to the right person. So that's a massive step in your favor. Just taking a quick step. I know I'm jumping backwards and forwards here, but obviously we mention journaling, keeping a journal in terms of how you're feeling on a day-to-day basis, because then you can put, just list your feelings, how you're feeling. You can also put down things like what you did on that particular day and what worked for you and what didn't. So you've got a kind of a body of evidence that you can refer back to and say, okay, I did this 3 months ago and that worked really well for me, and I'm going to repeat that process. So you can kind of whittle away what's good and what works and what doesn't work. So I think journaling is a great idea. I don't know your thoughts on that.
I think it's a good idea, and it certainly keeps other aspects of your life in check as well. Um, Especially if you're not feeling right in yourself anyway, because a lot of people, once they've lost their job, it's a bit of a downward spiral for a while, because especially in this pandemic where we've had lockdown, there's been a lot of depression. Um, it doesn't appear to be a lot of up. It just appears to be just down, and it's going to appear that way to a lot of people. We just have hope that there is hope all the time. And for those of us who are older, and we've seen this before, although none of us have lived through an epidemic like this, um, we just keep that hope and then keep ourselves occupied. And that's an important thing. It's where you haven't got anything to do, and you have idle thoughts is when the depression creeps in a little deeper. Um,
That's why you've got to keep busy, I think. You've got to keep yourself busy in terms of thinking about what you can do to get yourself back on your feet. I think the thing we mentioned and had discussed earlier is find someone to brainstorm ideas with. Because sometimes just simply talking through an idea with other people will give you a different insight. And we were talking earlier when I had the idea of, um, in terms of, what you can do rather than just sending a CV out, what you can do, what steps you can take to improve your chances of getting a job in the industry that you want. And the steps that I've outlined, don't just send a CV off, do research on the company, read their website, ring them even if you have to, and ask them information, and then figure out the right person that you need to send your CV to, and then you can tailor it and you can explain your situation and tell them, look, this is what I've done. I want to work for your company. This is my experience. I've done research on you, and I've sent this CV to you directly rather than sending it through to the HR department, for example, because this is how I would operate if I worked for you, and this is how I would generate new business or get in touch with the right people that I need to speak to in the organizations that I'm trying to sell to. So, you've kind of done something there that other people aren't necessarily going to do. And that's going to give you a massive head start in terms of being successful or even, getting called for an interview. Um, Again, I think, with your journaling, you can kind of make a list of your strengths and weaknesses. There's a ton of online resources that we've already mentioned that you can utilize, the Coursera and the Allison websites. Speak to your JSA advisor, ask them, potentially someone that could proofread your CV if that's a problem that you've got, or how to write a decent CV. Don't just sit there thinking I've got to do this on my own. There's lots of people that you can speak to and go to that will signpost you where you can go to get the kind of help that you need.
I mean that is the
Written everything down, you can then figure out how you will overcome them by finding the resources you need, potentially free, speaking to people. If you're not very good at writing, you can get help putting together a CV. And did we mention uploading your CV, obviously, to various websites like Monster? You mentioned
no,
Read
no. I mean
online,
there
for
are plenty
example.
of websites. Certainly. I mean, there's the IT Jobs Board, there's Reed, there's Indeed,
Fish
um,
for Jobs,
Fish for Jobs, Job for
local
Jobs.
newspapers,
Is it Job is Job?
much.
There's a lot of them, and there's the CV library certainly. I mean, but when you look up online jobs, there will be any number of companies that will come up, and some of them link into each other. Even, I mean, where we live in Nottingham, there's a Nottingham Evening Post that you can upload your CV to, and there are jobs on there, but they also link into other places like EMCC jobs, um, which is for the county. Um, but going back to a very important aspect, there were actually two. One that came to mind actually while you were talking was when you're actually designing your CV for your for the for the main job that you're applying for, the skill that you're already working or related area. Um, there are any number of places for information you can go on how to get support for that. There are places like Futures. There is your jobs coach. There are lots of different websites, but make sure that it's a UK based um, support because different countries have variations on what they require for their CVs. And if it's in the wrong order, there are many companies that will just throw it in the bin because they can be quite different. American CVs are quite different too in what they expect to what they do in Britain. Um, that's an all important one. Perhaps the most frustrating part about that is just that regardless of creating a new CV, when you apply for jobs with companies, they'll expect you to put that same information into their application. So you'll just be doing it twice. Unfortunately, there's no way around this. You just have to do that. Um, and as long as you fill it out properly, that application, by doing your research about the company and being clear and concise about your job history, and you can articulate well, then that's going to bring you that much further up um, the percentage tables towards getting that job, or at the very least being shortlisted. Another aspect that we actually did miss, which was the second part, is about routine. We were talking about depression, about idle thoughts. Um, there are two aspects to actually having a routine. The first one is that you set around um, a certain amount of time every day to search for jobs and to actually fill out applications. Um, because the problem with it is that if you just do it if and when, you find yourself going days without actually doing an application, and then you're rushing towards your next meeting with your job coach, and then you've got little to show, or it could look like that you've done a load of jobs that just are rubbish because you haven't spent the time to search properly. And to be honest, that there aren't a huge amount of jobs, and there haven't been in the last, certainly in the last 5 years. So it's that much important to set a certain amount of time each day, um, and then you don't have to spend all of your days doing that. The second part to having a schedule for your day is it gives you it's a routine. So you've got your time allocated for searching jobs. You've got your time allocated to cooking meals and from scratch. So eating better, and the stress relief from the time that you spend preparing that food. And then there's time for leisure and watching television, and then even anything else that you want to do in between. And then, of course, there's the most important things about appointments, meetings with your work coach, and potentially um, interviews for jobs. If you can be organised, it goes that much further to make finding your job, but also goes that much better at dealing with your depression or managing it. Won't say depression, we'll say unhappiness.
Coach, you still meeting with people at the moment, or is that virtual now? Are they doing it on the phone, or
We
are they
do it
still?
on the phone. I don't meet with anybody anymore now anyway because my status has changed.
So the main thing is get yourself organised, have a routine, think about what you want to do, and then make a plan of how you're going to go about, you know, doing, getting everything ready and prepared, and sending and contacting the companies that you want to work for. I mean, just some parting thoughts. Don't despair. Like, make a plan. But unless you take action, nothing's going to happen. So you've got to make that plan and take action towards the goal that you want to achieve. Try and stay positive, but what you need to do first and foremost is deal with the important issues that we talked about in our first video. Get in touch with JSA, get yourself registered with the agencies that can help you. I also mentioned in our last video potentially looking at companies, organizations that you can volunteer for. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be anything that is, in the same sector that you've previously worked in. For example, you might have worked in the IT sector, but you could now work for a charity that's helping homeless people, for example. It will just get you out and about. It will keep you busy. It will keep your mind occupied. These organizations can also pay you costs towards your travel. So if you need to drive there, they'll reimburse you for your petrol or whatnot, or for transport costs whilst you're working there as well. It's a great way of getting out of the house, great way of meeting new people. You're obviously doing some good within your local community. And you never know, you're building your contact base up, something that potentially could help you out in the future.
I mean, there are other aspects.
I'll definitely look at.
There is another important aspect is for many of us who are from the southeast, as you and I are, We are quite used to travelling quite long distances to get to work, 20, 30 miles even, because there are so many people living there. You have to look further afield to be able to be, you to have a chance of getting a job. Um, and if you're living further north in the Midlands like we are, or even further north than that, looking further afield may be the option that you have to take. Obviously, if the cost of travel outweighs the salary, and it makes it impractical,
Yeah,
um, then there's no point in doing that.
yeah, exactly. I was thinking the same.
Um, another thing, of course, is you have to remember is exercise. Keep exercising. Keep getting out, getting fresh air while you're searching for those roles. But there was another aspect that came to mind that you're better to talk about than I am, and that's volunteering.
Yeah, I mentioned that. There are various websites that you can go to find local volunteering opportunities. Um, there is, we're based in Nottingham, so there is Nottingham ones. You could just search for volunteering opportunities locally on Google, and they will come up. I guess you can also ask your jobs advisor, what volunteering opportunities are there, and what agencies to approach. So they can certainly help you. But it doesn't have to be for charities. I mean, you might just want to volunteer at your local library, for example. You might want to volunteer just going and visiting somebody locally that's maybe living on their own. So you're spending some time with them, or taking people to hospital appointments. There's a ton of things that you can do that don't necessarily relate to potential jobs, but it will just keep you busy. It will give you something to do, something to look forward to, just give you a little bit of purpose to your day or to your week, so you're not spending all your time at home, thinking constantly about your problems. You're actually out there getting some fresh air, meeting new people, talking to people, just making new contacts and doing something useful and giving back to the community, while you have the time to do it. And because you're doing something that's keeping you occupied, I think personally it then makes it easier for you to stay in that mindset of, okay, I also now need to do X, Y, Z. These are the additional steps that I now need to take to help me get a job. And you'll also be working with other people, potentially people that you can talk to and get advice from, and they may know other people, other contacts or organizations that are actually looking to employ people. So there's a ton of things you can do, but I go back to to what I said earlier. I would think about what I can do personally to differentiate myself from everyone else out there that's looking for a job. What extra steps can I take that will improve my chances of getting a job? So let's say it's us two, we're applying for the same job. I will always be thinking, what more can I do to ensure my success, in terms of me being successful in getting this job? What can I do that you're not going to do? You know, does that mean, for example, that I send my CV directly to the sales manager, where you've only sent your CV directly to the HR department? That's already given me a step above, or a better opportunity or a chance of getting that job than
That
you.
comes with the research bit.
Yeah, so that's the way you've got to think about it, I think. And just sitting down with somebody and brainstorming ideas. So I've had certain successes doing certain things, but I'd be happy to share that with you. So if you'd say to me, okay, I've applied for this job, didn't get anywhere, and I'd say to you, oh, I applied for a similar job, but I managed to get it. And you can say, all right, what did you do? And I'll tell you the steps that I took that are different from the steps that you took. And you can incorporate those ideas going forward into your job search. So it's always good to talk to other people. It's always good to meet other people, new people, get their perspective on life, and what they've done to get to where they are, essentially. Um, I did say earlier, don't despair. there are opportunities out there. So right now you've got to be a little bit, I don't know if selfish is the right word. I guess you have to be, yeah, it is the right word. You've got to be selfish. You know, you've got to think of you. What can you do to make sure that you get the job that you want or get back into employment? You've got to think selfishly. You've got to take those extra steps above and beyond everyone else. And I don't necessarily, I didn't like the word selfish, but I think it just shows your determination, your ability to think maybe outside of the box, that old cliche. You're thinking slightly differently from everybody else, because that's what it takes to become successful, and that's what it takes to land the job that you really want. You know, doing something different, going above and beyond what everyone else is prepared to do.
I agree.
Yeah, I think that's a good place. If anybody has any questions, please leave a comment for us. Please subscribe, you know, and hit the like button, and we will do our very best to get back to you. Obviously, we're not experts on this, but we've been through similar situations, and we've tried things to get ourselves back on our feet that have been successful for us, and we'll be happy to share that with you. Just leave us a comment below.
Oh, that's great.
Thank you very much.
Recapping though, in
Mm.
our last video, step one was clearing your house, dealing with your debts, your creditors, your utility companies, and then the next, and part of that step was applying for benefits. In step two, we discussed tips for finding jobs and about thinking short to medium, but also in the long term, and followed by um, thinking about education for the future. In stage three, there was more speculative stuff and more focused, targeted um, applications. As Imran was saying about finding the name of the sales manager if it's a sales role, as opposed to going through HR and then trying to get the CV direct and then illustrating your skills and your desire to excel in that role in their company. But as a footnote, there are a few other bits, including, as we discussed, about stress and about exercise and about eating well. But there is a fourth step, less important, but certainly nonetheless important in itself. It's about how much sleep we get. Um, Things about getting a little bit extra sleep, making sure to go to bed at a reasonable time, because you need to be refreshed for the day to deal with um, searching for jobs, which is a stressful thing. There are other things like books you can actually get on how to survive and prosper in the recession was one book, but there are many others that can also give you help and support to get through these difficult times financially and employment-wise, because all all and any information can be useful. Um, there are other things like if you do find yourself unable to buy food for a while, you can talk to your universal credit coach or your job seeks allowance coach and ask them about getting a voucher for a food bank. I know a lot of people don't want to go there, but if there's a difference between eating and not eating, a food bank is definitely worth um, visiting if that possibility arises, knowing that there is support there if needed. Um, Another thing is that once you are receiving benefits, uh, another good thing to do would be to start stockpiling just a little bit of extra bits of food here and there, some tins, because if you um, when your benefits do run out, if they run out in 6 months, if you're on JSA or you had a big bill to pay, having a little bit of backup food in that cupboard can make all the difference between eating and not eating. But also, there are crisis loans still out there, but that would be visiting places like the Citizens Advice Bureau, who can help you in all areas to do with your CV. Um, they can help you with your financial difficulties and things like that, and support you in budgeting. Um, but I think that's probably everything. I can't think of anything else. Um, any more thoughts from you, Imran?
No, I think that's enough information for today. Yeah, please hit the like and subscribe button.
Please do. And
For the
thank you
next
for
video.
joining us. Yeah, on the next video. And thank you for joining us on. Join us again. Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.